And we're on live. Snowmaker coming in. A lot of talk about this over the last, really, we've been talking about this one for several days. I know I started contacting people late last week saying, hey, we're keeping our eyes on this one. To me, has never looked like a major winter storm at all, what I consider a major winter storm. But as we're getting closer, I think we're all sort of trending our numbers up a little bit. I think that's the way we should play these things, not throw enormous numbers and then come down. I still think my team is one of the more conservative. We'll try and explain why, but we certainly see the products that are out there that are starting to throw bigger numbers. And by bigger numbers, I think the biggest numbers I'm looking at locally are the 4 to 6. That's not our forecast at this point, but we certainly see those numbers and see how others could get there. Certainly not saying that that won't happen, but I think in general, we'll talk about why we're looking at maybe more conservative numbers. Nick is with me from home on his day off. Rachel is out working for news this morning. She'll be back with us this afternoon. And Tony is going to be on the road, I know, later this evening with the falling snow. They may join us as well. Nick, you want to start off with any of your just kind of overview notes?
Yeah, I think watching this system from through the weekend and kind of tracking it. I was watching it Saturday and Sunday and knew there was some potential here for at least a little bit of snow. I think that the last couple of days we've seen a couple trends in models. I think on Sunday night and even into Monday morning, initially we saw models trying to get this storm system and the actual low across maybe some Missouri, right up the Ohio River Valley, somewhere in the western Kentucky range, which would have meant likely a warmer solution and not necessarily as much snow, but maybe even seeing some rain mixed in. Over the last 24 hours, I think we've seen a lot of model trends that have gone towards a colder solution and actually pushing this low quite a bit further south, where now it's actually coming to the question of not, or is it going to fall as snow, but it's more of how much snow. I don't think that rain is going to be an issue. I don't think even in southern Illinois, especially, that we're expecting any ice either out of this event. Because of the track is going to be so far south, it's not going to be an issue of getting the warm air north anymore.
And I think the one thing that's removed from that was earlier I was concerned that we may have a freezing rain, certainly a sleet component a little farther north. While I still think there's some of that potential, I think it stays way south now. Now, I do know some of the national products I've seen coming in, even I think I was just looking at in-car, still showing some freezing rain potential through Stoddard County and into parts of western Kentucky. The timing on that seemed to be closer to 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., so we'll keep an eye on that and fine-tune it. But when we're talking about southern Illinois, I think you're right, this more southerly track, a lot more cold air, and should lead us to staying more in the snow. There may be some sleet, but the other thing that does, and what I want to start with as we start sharing the screen here, is the colder air is the drier air.
Right, no doubt about it.
And if the screen share is working now, there we go. That should get you to look at looking at Buff Kit here, and I've loaded the HR cubed. This is the model I'm going to use when we get inside this time frame. And what I'm looking at is we're starting from right about now. A couple of different things I'm looking at. Of course, we've got the cloud layer. We know it's out there. That when the red and green lines are close together or touching, you're looking at saturation. Also highlight that over here on the left with the purple, but certainly see our clouds in there. But as we come south and those red and green lines separate, then you're into dry air, and we still have a layer of very dry air. So even though right now, if you look at a radar product, and we're doing this a little after noon for anybody that watches later, if you look at a radar product from around noon to 12:30, there's activity on radar. But I don't think it's going to get to the ground. I think a lot of it's going to evaporate right in this layer. And Nick, we were talking about this earlier. What we have to do now is cycle through time and see when does that red and green line come together all the way to the ground, right?
No doubt, no doubt. And you were mentioning it's been so cold. Yesterday was frigid, even this morning, very, very cold. So not only are you dealing with the dry or the cold air, you're dealing with the dry air, of course, as well. So definitely something to take into account there.
Yeah, and as I'm looking, I just rolled back and looked. Our dew point here right now is 9. So very dry. So anyway, I'm going to put this in time cycle, and we start walking through time here. This is out to 1 o'clock.
I'm not sure that we're getting the screen share to work at this point. I just checked. That worked, I think. Nope.
Got it now?
Yeah, it's being.
That's all right.
Yep, now we got it.
Okay, thank you. So here we go. What we were just talking about was this layer of dry air where red and green are not touching. And I'm going to cycle this through time, and we'll see them come closer together and closer together. And remember, the ground is all the way down here, so still very dry air showing up as we walk through time, and we're up to 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. And now even the model, and the model I really trust in this time frame, saying that some snow is possible by 7 p.m. But with this dry air, it's not all going to get to the ground, certainly, even if some is, and we move along. And then I think we were pretty much in consensus that we thought this is a 10 o'clock time frame is when this is showing up. That at 10 o'clock, now we're saturated all the way down. We're showing 2 flakes snow, good saturation layer, good omega, so we've got some lift going on, and the snow growth zone is saturated and saturated all the way down. So to me, even though you're looking at the chance that you're going to see a snowflake here and a snowflake there, I don't think this thing really kicks in. And we're looking at we're currently looking at the Cape Girardeau location. 10 o'clock for a real start time. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely think that is. Just looking over model data here this afternoon and this morning, really seemed, 10 p.m. is about when it starts in Southern Illinois, I think. Obviously in Southeast Missouri, that it comes a little bit earlier. But in Southern Illinois, probably 10 to 4 a.m. is what kind of the time period for me seemed like the heaviest snow coming in.
Okay, and I switched our view over to Poplar Bluff here, and it does hit saturation, as you just said, starting from the west and moving over, more like 8 p.m. So moving across. Also notice that the other critical line we'll be watching is the freezing line, and according to this model, very close. So a little bit of a warm up in there, and I'll bump this 1 hour each way. And it does get very close. So if we allow for a little bit of wiggle, this is a projection. This is not gospel. This isn't written down the way it's going to happen. This is a projection. If we would get a little more of a push of some warm air in here, and this melts a little bit, then you are dealing with some sleet. This certainly, I don't think in that depth would make freezing rain, but possibly a little bit of sleet.
No doubt. And you mentioned that, and look how close of a line that was on that, whichever one you had there. Just look how close that is to the freezing line. So we're talking about that little dotted line there that says 0 at the bottom of it going straight up. That's the freezing line. So really keeping an eye on that, and you can see that actual temperature, so the red line that goes up and down, the temperature through the atmosphere gets very close to that 0 line. So if it crosses over for even an hour or so, now you're talking about maybe less snow in some areas. And I know this is the Poplar Bluff sounding, but you're talking about less snow and maybe more in the way of sleet.
Yep, exactly what we're looking at there. Now switch back to Carbondale. And as we do the same thing, we notice that line never gets close. So we are talking about all snow. That was about all I wanted to do with the buff kit. Anything you wanted to look at there, Nick, before I leave this?
No, I think we're all right. I think we got a good explanation there.
The other thing I wanted to walk through in time here is looking at about 5,000 feet aloft and what's going on in the atmosphere, and starting out right about now. This is a projection from this morning, and now we're looking at the high-res NAM and the fact that our winds are still from the northwest. So we're still pulling from that dry source as we're looking at the projection. But as we step through the afternoon, we see a change, and now we're up to about 6 p.m. and all of a sudden it's a south wind coming in, and this yellow and orange, we're looking at vorticity here. When we talk about the waves, this is what defines those waves, and on the front edge it works out to be lift and twist, and that all starts to come in at about the same time and step through time. And then by the time we get to 9 o'clock, and certainly by the time we get to midnight, boy, we are in a strong south to southwest flow. So we start to push a lot more moisture in here. We start to see that warm air pushing over the top. Again, we're talking about a loft, but we've also got that lift and twist that's going to help build the system. And it leads me to think we may go from this kind of cloudy flurry thing, and then back to this same theme. And this is a different model than what we were looking at before, but the same thing to me, that from nothing, a little bit, nothing, and then bam, an accumulating snow that just sort of starts and just drops a blanket, and we go from nothing on the ground to pretty white out there pretty quick.
Yeah, no doubt. And I know I don't want you to go back to Buff Kit, but when you compare this to say what we're going to see winds from at the surface, so here down at the ground level, I definitely think it's something to consider. We're going to have still a lot of color here in place at the ground level, but where's the moisture coming from? You know, when you talk about cold air, it's tough sometimes to get moisture to work in there. And going back to that 850 flow, or that low level flow here, if you go actually over to the 4K NAM real quick on Buff Kit while you were back over there.
Oh, okay.
Go back to 4K NAM real quick in Carbondale, or even Cape Girardeau works is just fine as well. So if we go back to that and we pull up about, let's say midnight, whenever we get everything loaded in, if we go to around midnight or so, Cape Girardeau, Carbondale, either one of them, you see that right at 800 millibars, you have a very strong, 50 to 55 knot wind. And I think that's exactly what you're looking at there. That's your warm, moist air being pumped in. That's where your moisture is coming from. That's something we refer to sometimes dealing with severe weather, probably more than anything. You start talking about your low-level jet. Well, that's what that is, and that's where your moisture is coming from. That's where that little warm air is coming from as well.
Yeah, we can see the overrunning here. You're exactly right. You take that jet streak, bring it across, or that little low-level jet, and that's where you're seeing the inversion peak out there. And as we continue to go over, that's where, of course, we've got this saturated layer all setting up. And underneath it, we've still got that little bit of dry that we've got to keep our eye on, and actually a flow at the surface at that time that maybe is even still from that dry northeast flow, but starting to switch over right around midnight or so.
No doubt, no doubt.
All right, I think I had anything in HR cubed here you want to look at?
You may want to just go through, I think that, I know these aren't always exact, but if we go through just a quick radar, simulated radar, kind of gives you the idea maybe that, you're seeing some of the snow right now on radar off to the west, but I think HR does a pretty good job of showing that dry air, that it takes a while for that to actually work its way in. When we were talking, it probably actually doesn't get here until late tonight. But there's the latest trends there on the radar simulation. So some of the heaviest snow there starting to already moving in southern Illinois. It looks like sometime, as we mentioned earlier, probably a little after 10 or so, the heaviest snow really starting to move in. And it really just continues for several hours.
I think one of the features we saw earlier this morning, too, that I still see here and I want to talk about is, and again, we're looking at a radar simulation, but tied to where we may have that mixture. And this shows up so many times that very close to that, you see what looks like very heavy snow next to very light snow. And I think we're actually looking at possibly a little bit of convective going on in here, that you may have some very small, but pretty impressive little snow bursts.
Yeah, no doubt about
some of these. The other thing that's interesting, this is an update since I've looked, notice on the front edge, it still does show that chance of a little bit of a mixture, that in the color coding saying even in southern Illinois, we might see that isolated spot or two. Now, I think because of where the temperatures are going to be, this is going to be sleet if it happens, not freezing rain. But even, again, a model that I trust on this saying that you may see on that leading edge a little ice pellet activity mixed in.
No doubt about it.
And we can just look at that real quick. Let's just look at temperatures as they loop through on this. These are surface temperatures, and just really kind of holding through the 20s, a little bit of a warm up, but holding in the 20s. To me, kind of that indication too, that whatever falls lays. There's not going to be a big melting component on this one.
Ain't that the truth? Yes, it is definitely going to, whatever falls is going to stay. It's going to be around for probably a couple of days. as we get the colder air getting wrapped in eventually behind this storm system. And of course, anything that initially starts to fall is probably going to stick as well.
Yeah, we'll shut that off and get back here and start wrapping this thing up. A couple of questions came in. What time is expected snowfall to start around Perry County? Again, somebody probably joined in a little later. I think the earliest we see snow is 8 or 9. I think it's more likely 10 o'clock to midnight.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And as you mentioned, it may be quite heavy, especially in that midnight time frame. I think for at least Southern Illinois, the good news is that it's not going to be hitting in a high traffic time period. I think it gives a lot of schools a lot of time, of course, to call off in the morning, even overnight. And I think a lot of drivers this evening have nothing to worry about. But tomorrow morning's commute could be a little slick.
Yeah, an early morning commute. And the next question is one that I don't think we've actually talked well to yet. So thank you, David. Snow totals for Gallatin, Saline County. I don't think we've really talked totals that we've written anything down here, Nick. We need to take a little bit of time and look at that. Your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts are, well, I'll tell you what, a couple of days ago, I debated on Saturday and Sunday whether to even talk about amounts in this storm system, because everything was kind of pointing towards a 1 to 3 inch event for Southern Illinois. Even as of yesterday, it was kind of maybe a 1 to 3 inch event. And honestly, I was kind of leaning towards the 1 to 2 inch, talking about a warmer solution. But here over the last 24 hours, the colder solution, we've actually seen an increase in the amount of moisture available. So the amount of, if you melted down the snow, the amount of liquid that's actually going to fall. We've actually seen a bit of an increase in that as well. So something to consider, and I would actually say that we've actually taken our totals up quite a bit, is for areas like Saline, Gallatin County, and honestly for much of Southern Illinois. I'm really leaning more in the 2 to 4, but even possibly the 3 to 5 inch range. One of the other things we need to talk about probably there is snow ratios. At this point, it looks like we may end up with ratios around 10 to 1, so 10 inches or a little more than 10 inches to 1. So probably somewhere in the range of 12 to 15 inches of snow to 1 inch of liquid. So if you take that into account, and you have to think that we're probably looking at somewhere around 3/10 to 4/10 of an inch of liquid, you come out, not too difficult to come out near 5 inches of snow in some places. That may be on the isolated end. But overall, probably for much of Southern Illinois, looking at a 3 to 5 inch snow.
Yeah, I think that's where my numbers have gone. I put up yesterday 2 inches in general. I thought some could be less. And certainly I thought the max axis was closer to 4 inches. And I thought it was going to be a relatively small max axis. That has changed for me today. I see a little more liquid. I was on yesterday early saying I thought ratios were going to be over 10 to 1. I saw some indications of as much as 17 to 1 at times, and we'll go through a little bit of that. I'm back in the HR Cube. I'm back on Carbondale here, and I want to go over and show a couple of different products that we use as well. And one, I've put the ratios on here. This is the computer telling us what to expect on ratios. It's this bright light blue line. And here's the 10 to 1. Let's actually move that over. Here's the 10 to 1 line right down here. And you can see it stays above that, running a little closer to 15 to 1 inside the event. Does run a little closer to 17 before the event, but 15 to 1, that's fairly significant. So normally where if you got 1/10 of an inch, you're looking at an inch of snow. Now you're looking at 1.5 to 2 inches, quite a change there. And also the other tool inside a buff kit, when we pull across this is Carbondale, and this is not through the end of the event. This is through the end of the time run on this, and you can see it shows around a 3 inch. I'll change this up just a little bit. Still coming back at about 3 inches, and I've set that to use its ratio. So my number now probably goes to a 3 inch general. There may be some spots that see as little as 2, but let's go with a 3 inch general. And then I think you have to change the max axis up to a 6. But along with Nick, I think we're probably looking in that 3 to 5, so maybe a 4 is the average. But I'm going to use 3 as a general, expect 3 inches out of this. and know that there's a possibility for at least some, if not quite a few, to see a little more than that. And I do think some could see a little less.
Yeah, definitely. The trends are going up, and we'll continue to look that over and adjust our numbers upwards as need be. I think that's probably a pretty good way to approach it.
A couple of other numbers coming in as I watch them. SREF coming in with a 4.5 as a projection for Carbondale. And when I looked at, I'll bring it up here, NCAR has now thrown all of Southern Illinois in a blanket of 3 to 6. We're trying to be a little more specific than that big of a window. But I think everyone's on, a similar page. And that's where we should be with the education, with the experience, and knowing that we're all just interpreting the same sets of data. These forecasts should not be scattered all over the page. So I think that need to kill your mic. The 3 to 6 is going to be pretty solid. Someone coming in with sleet and freezing rain possible in Jackson County. If so, when? We don't think much. And I don't think freezing rain at all. If anything, a little bit of ice pellets, and that would be on the front edge 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and should be very brief if it does happen at all.
Agreed.
Next question in. Someone traveling to a meeting in Jackson County this evening. Steve, I don't think you have any problem in the early evening. It's going to be in that late evening and overnight kind of stuff. And really, even though I think it starts maybe at 10, I'm going to say from midnight to 4, midnight to 5 in Southern Illinois is kind of a critical time for travelers.
Yeah.
And hi, Ryan. Thanks for joining us. Always good to have Ryan in from Mount Vernon, a great weather source for us, keeping us posted. As the snow starts tonight, be sure and fill us up. I'm a Twitter guy, not a Facebook guy. These two spend a lot more time on Facebook. Get those images, get those reports to us so that we can help pass those along, even just by association. We'll, of course, have updated forecasts on the air 5, 6, and 10. I have not even started making my official forecast yet for air, so the numbers by then may even tweak just a little bit. But overall, I think we see our numbers going up from the 2 we were on yesterday. Nick says 2 to 4, you say, minimum, and probably 5 and 6 in some places.
I definitely think maybe 4 to 5 in some places. 6 maybe on the high side to me, but I definitely think somewhere in probably the range of the 4 to 5 in some places.
Yep, I think I'm on board with that. I didn't want to speak for you. I think 3 to 4 in general, less than 6 in most, and to me it's got to get in that 6 to 8 range before I start to consider it a major event, and I just don't think we're there. I'm not going to talk much about this, but it does need to be addressed. The numbers I have looked at on the event, and even if I just look at vorticity and 500 millibars, the Thursday night event to me has potential to be more significant, more impact than this event.
I don't think you're far off there at all. At this point, I was telling you earlier before we came on that I was kind of leaning towards a more southern storm track with this one. Which may not make the heaviest snow in southern Illinois per se along Route 13. However, there may be some parts of southern Illinois across the Ohio River and into western Kentucky where at this point that may be the zone we're really looking for. But still a lot of time that we're going to see some big adjustments, I think. I think anytime you're dealing with 2 systems coming in, I think that a lot of times you see the first system come in, you really need to focus on that one because you're going to see some fairly big changes after it exits and you wait for the second one to come in.
And I am much more concerned with the Thursday night event and potential to see some ice component in the precipitation than I am tonight. I think there's a little bit tonight. I think it's focused south of southern Illinois, but I think the Thursday night event has to be monitored for that and then snow on top of it.
No doubt about it.
All right, guys. Thanks to my team for joining in. I know Rachel's been running all day. Thanks to Nick because it's his day off. Thanks to anybody that joined us or watches us later. Certainly get us your comments on this if you want to see more of these. And we'll get updated forecasts on social media, on the web, and on the air, 5, 6, and 10, all of it coming up later today.